Huh.
Alright, so this is a little video of this stash of wood here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. You can see they're 12 or so inches wide. The shorter ones are about 4 feet long, and the other ones are something like 54 inches, 5.5 feet. Anyway, I got a couple more right here. I was holding back out of the way, and then I'm not going to pan the shop and show you. I have another pile pretty much just like this under my workbench. You can sort of see the date on that. It's 89. Looks like November up here. Maybe not November. I don't know. It looks like NOV, so it could be that, but I'm not sure what the 1/89 is about. Anyway, that other one laying down there in the pile also says 89. An old bird carver friend of mine gave me these boards some years back. And he'd had them for a while at that point. So he moved out of the area, and he was retiring and not in good health, and I had done a lot of work for him on his house. So the reason I'm showing you this is that I've got a guitar over here, and I'll do some video of that as well. I'm going to be doing some repair work on. I needed something to patch the top that has some tight grain on it, and you can see the grain lines coming in there. Those grain lines are a little tighter than a 32nd each, and that's what I'm trying to match on this guitar top that I'm dealing with. This is not spruce, however. This is sugar pine. I'm hoping that for the size of the patch I need to do, that's not going to be an issue. I can hopefully get the color match fairly good. I'll show you the guitar here. So this is the guitar in question. A Washburn. I haven't looked up the serial number yet to find out what year it is, or really what quality, what part of the line it's in. It is a solid top. Can't tell. I'm thinking that the sides, well, yeah, they're laminate. Okay, so it's a laminate side, probably a laminate back. I haven't looked at it that close. This is the grain I'm going to be trying to match. This grain really is all over the place, and if I can get close enough here, it's not really a book match top. It's close, but it's these. Find my finger here. Okay, gotta go further down. Nope. Gotta go farther over. Okay, so here's your center line. And you see the angle that these are coming out at, and see the thickness of these lines. It's quite a bit thinner than these lines, and they're also a lot straighter in the top. So we're not looking at a very well book match top, if at all. But anyway, when we get over here to where this bash is at, it actually goes wide and then narrow again for quite a ways right in here. Pretty close growth rings in here, which means it was a really slow growth year for whatever reason that occurs. And then over here they get wider again, which is normal typically to go wide in the center, narrower in the center, and then wider as it gets out farther. And this kind of goes back and forth, so some sporadic growth there. Fortunately, where I'm tying in here, we get wider again, and that matches what I have. I'm going to attempt at this point, is what I believe I'm going to do. I'm going to pick up a line here. Excuse me. I'm going to pick up a line here, and I'm going to cut the top all the way through with that line, and I'm going to make a new piece to go in here where this bashed part is. I've debated just, mashing this all together, clamping it in, super gluing it or whatever, and then I would be able to probably sand the finish out. But you know, how do you fill that if you do that? I don't want to just gob at it with filler. Yeah, so that's the puzzle. And I also have some mahogany, and I'm thinking about, once I have the top opened up, I might just put a block inside. I'm going to have to cut back. Now there's the problem there. See, on the top I can run that line through, and that's going to blend. You'll see a line in the binding where I have to cut through the binding. I've ordered a white black binding and purfling. I'll have to make up something that matches this. Anyway, that I can, you know, so I'll have a nice clean splice on the top. This side is not going to be clean no matter what happens. Anyway, that's the extent of what I'm going to attempt to do on this guitar. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so here's that piece of pine we were looking at earlier in the big block. I just cut a corner out of that block, and then where there's already some, you can see there's natural cracks there that are going perpendicular to the growth rings, and so that perpendicular line to the growth ring is where I split it. So I have a split block that is square to the growth rings. Now that is what you call quarter sawn. And so even these big time companies that go and tell you they're using quarter sawn wood, but then they just saw through a blank, this way it actually split and followed the grain, the run out of the grain. So there's no slash, there's no weirdness going on here. When I run this through the joiner and then peel off a piece of this to thin down for a top patch here, this is going to be truly quarter sawn and running out with the grain of the wood. Not so you could cut this board and you could cut it quarter sawn, but cut it at an angle to the board, or cut it to an angle of how the grain is running out. So that wouldn't be a good thing. That's why sometimes when you guys are working on tops and you're peeling peeling a bridge off, or you're up underneath a fretboard extension and you're trying to get under it, and what happens is your blade goes in and it follows the grain because it's not running parallel to the top, it's running at an angle. And that's why, because they're not using split billets. And so when anybody wants to argue with you about why custom, or one-of-a-kind guitars are better, if the guy's splitting billets for tops, you're not going to beat that. That's going to be the absolute best thing you could have. I know of one guy that does that, Pagelli, in the Swiss Alps. And if you haven't checked his stuff out, check it out. He built some extremely interesting and beautiful instruments. Anyway, I'm not an acoustic builder at this point. I do a lot of repair. But that's the right way to get a piece of quarter sawn split billet of wood, so it's got perfect run out. Anyway, my little 2 cents on that topic. Well, it's the next evening. This is the Washburn, so I haven't even looked it up yet, so I'm still not aware of what year it is. It is a D25S. I haven't looked that up yet either. So what I've done is I've machined, what to do with it here? I've got a piece of this pine we were splitting out yesterday, and I've gotten it. I milled it down to it's about 175 right now, and just a quick mic in the sound hole. Put this at about 160, which is of course including the finish, and that's pretty thick for a top. So I haven't looked inside this thing yet, and I'm wondering if it's got like a little ring around the inside of the. So, but I will get in there with the. Well, once I open this up, I'll know exactly what I'm dealing with. So anyway, tape the straight edge down as parallel as possible to one of the growth rings. So one of the lines in the grain, and I'm just going to take a new X-Acto, and I'm just going to trace it. A little hesitation here. I'm still debating, even though I've got the camera rolling, whether or not I want to go all the way through the binding at this point. And I got some binding in actually. So the black-white purfling strips, I forget what the thickness is this way, but they're about 75 that way, 0.075 tall, and they're going to be sitting in here, stacked up here. Obviously the black isn't an issue, but the white is really white compared to this cream colored binding here, and not really knowing if this was a cream color binding or if it was just the color of the finish on it, or age, or what exactly, but I'll have to just deal with that. I didn't want to get off-white binding in case it was the wrong off-white. I'd rather take it from white to whatever I want. So, and I'm still debating on whether, if I do that, if I cut straight across here, and then do I cut in and stagger these joints, or do I just kind of blend them all in on this one angle? This obviously isn't going to be a perfect repair, as much as I'd like to think it would end up that way. So I am just going to start with the wood at this point, and this particular roll has cork on the bottom of it, so I'm just the top of the guitar is protected from the cork. Not that it's even remotely critical, because I'm obviously going to be blending the finish repair in across here. And I'm going to just keep cutting through the top until I can't, or get a little saw out or something. I wish I had a veneer saw. I do not have a veneer saw. It would be a really good time to have one of those. And I'm going to try not to talk a lot, because I really don't want to, I may fast forward this, and I don't want to say anything that might be halfway intelligent and then have to go past. I say so many stupid things in the course of one of these videos that I think I'm just gonna be quiet and keep cutting. Getting hard to cut. I don't know if it's my if I'm cutting the edge of my rule, or if it's just because I'm deep enough that there's no clearance down there in the groove. think all I've accomplished pretty much is just getting through the finish at this point. And I'm down in there. I was trying not to put a ton of force on this, but I am actually got a pretty good amount of force on it right now. And I'm not really seeing any way around getting, if I were to cut all the way through the top here, then I'd have to come back and trace through part of this binding, and I'm going to have to make a repair at the binding at some point anyway, so I don't see necessarily an advantage to not just breaking it across here. And then as I'll feather back into these cuts on an angle, feather back into these cuts on an angle. Anyway, we're still just going to see what happens. Hope I don't end up buying a guitar. Oops. Well, I got a nice cut in the binding anyway now. Looks like we did it. I think I am going to have to take a saw and just saw now down against this roll and get into here. I got a 10 thousandths razor saw, and then I've got this thing, although it's not a, it's obviously, it's same saw I cut the neck off of the Takamine with. Problem is, yeah, I think I'm gonna have to cut. You see this saw blade here has this little nub hanging out, which I actually cut off of the front edge because it held the saw out. You can see I've cut these corners off because they had these. So I think I may have to modify this saw a bit, do that, and then I can get down in here. Veneer saw would be ideal because they're slightly, they got that slight oval on the edge where they allow you to go down right into it. So, but I think I'm going to have to do that and just start sawing next to this thing like so. Yeah, to get through this. Yeah, I'm going to modify this blade because it's actually doing nicely. Yeah. Alright, I'm going to turn this camera off and I'm going to modify this blade, and I'm going to saw this thing for a little while before I bring you back in. Alright, I've modified the saw, as you can see, and I'm actually through here. I've cut all the way through the binding down to where it meets the top, the sides, front and back, and then I'm through here, and I got an X brace, and it's probably right around here. I don't really want to cut into the brace if I can help it. And I am through the top right there. You can see how that's, so I think I'm pretty much through right here, so I'm very close to being all the way through. I got a light in there, and so I can actually see light. Through everything there. I don't have anything up in this area. Anyway, so I think the brace is right here, and that's fine. I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it up, and I'm going to trace along the bottom edge of this binding against the body with the razor blade, X-Acto knife, and cut the finish right there. And since I have all of this area on top to play with, I'll be able to throw some lacquer on here and see if lacquer thinner, and see if this is lacquer or what they might have used on this thing. I should probably just take a couple minutes and look it up and find out what year it is, because that would probably give me some indication. But a quick test with some lacquer on here, lacquer thinner, will tell me if that's a lacquer finish. And if it's a poly finish, then I'll just do the best I can with the blend. They don't typically blend that well. Run across anything or read anything or experienced anything that softens poly, and depending on what kind of poly especially. But keep my fingers crossed that it's going to be lacquer. Like I said, depending again on how old this guitar is. So outlining this, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to scribe along. Let me get the mirror and the flashlight out of here, and I'll tip it up. Yeah, Lou, back up. It's Halloween, and my dog is all freaked out, so she's hovering around my feet. All right, so just so we have an idea what's happening here. This, it's already cracked right here, but I'm going to just take and scribe along right on the edge of the binding so that it has a place to separate nice and cleanly. And I'm not going to do that on camera. I like to have an edge. I mean, I could probably trace for how much I've got to trace there, but I really do prefer, in a case like this with the straight edge, I have a nut layout gauge that's extremely flexible, and I'll probably just end up taping that right up against the edge of the binding and using that as my straight edge, just to cut that lacquer against or finish. Okay, bring you back in later. All right, so I did go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and just show you what I did here. Like I said, the net spacing rule, I went ahead and taped it right on the edge, and I've scored it, had it standing up where it was steady, and because I have this rule taped down here, I am able to hit it with, you know, some force after a few passes, and if it were to jump, all I would damage is the roll, which doesn't affect the way the roll operates at all. So, but I've definitely gotten through the lacquer. And I may even run that saw along here just to get cut down to the body. Of course, this is glued on that edge. I don't know how well that's going to separate. Alright, and then I have just a small section past the gash here, and I don't know if it's been real obvious or not, or even if you can tell, but these cracks and finish damage went all the way to actually where I cut the line. And so And I don't know if I explained it before, and the reason I decided to go with the line is I just think it's an easier way to blend a piece in, rather than if I were to say cut just at where this piece is cracked off pretty good. It's cracked all the way through to here and raised above the top, and then this gash here. So if I was just try to like re-glue that and then just cut a section out or something, then you've got a butt joint going across here, even if you kind of scarfed it in. I just think this is going to be a lot cleaner in the long run. It may seem more involved, but for me it doesn't really seem like it seemed like the better option. We'll see. Anyway, once again, I'm just going to keep fiddling here, and I'm going to turn the camera off and just take my time with this. Try to get through here. You know, the kerf that's in there, I have no idea if that's going to let loose. I'll have to look and see how far down the sidewall it goes actually. So chances are that's going to get destroyed. I may have to make some kerfing and replace it right in this section, which wouldn't be too big a deal either. So anyway, once again, I'm going to turn you off, bring you back when something new transpires.